Kevin Cirilli, Chief Washington Correspondent for Bloomberg Television and for Bloomberg Radio, joined by Jared Bernstein, a member of the White House Council of Economic Advisors and former Chief Economist and Economic Advisor to President Biden, as well as he has previously also served in the Obama administration. Jared, thanks so much for joining us. I was looking at the jobs market numbers, and I'll read from the Bloomberg terminal. The recovery in the U.S. labor market disappointed for a second month as modest job growth highlighted the persistently difficult prospects for millions of unemployed Americans. Non-farm payrolls increased by just 49,000 after a downwardly revised 227,000 December drop. This has strengthened the case for another relief package. President Biden gave the strongest indication yet that he will push for more stimulus without Republican support, saying that the jobs' weak economic data shows the risk of doing too little. Just when you talk with President Biden, when you talk with your team now, just a couple of weeks into the administration, what do you glean from today's jobs data report?
Much like what you were just reporting, the job market looks like it's in a stall in terms of job creation. You correctly were pointing out some of the bips and bops in these volatile monthly data. Just averaging that over the past 3 months, and you get 29,000 jobs a month. That's not nearly enough to get America back to work. It is clear to us, clear to the president, that the dual interacting crises of a health crisis that's engendered an economic one is alive and well and continues to plague too many American communities, too many workers, too many businesses. So the American Rescue Plan is scaled and calibrated to the magnitude of the problem. I would say that the key mantra for us is something you just referenced. The danger is doing too little, not too much. So we need to finally give this virus the knockout blow and launch a robust, inclusive and racially equitable recovery.
So, earlier today on Capitol Hill, of course, Vice President Kamala Harris in the early morning hours, about 12 hours ago now, casting a tie-deciding vote in the Senate in order to set up the roadmap and the procedure for the $1.9 trillion plan. Are you disappointed that this is going to be a partisan now issue and it doesn't look likely that any Republicans are going to get on board?
Well, it's not obvious to me that that's the end game here. I mean, the president has been engaging with Republicans. Our team has been engaging with both sides, trying to understand ways in which we can improve on the plan. He's not willing to chip away at the plan that's calibrated of a magnitude to finally wrestle this crisis to the ground. But he's certainly willing to listen to other ideas, and you saw some of this exchange around the direct impact payments or the checks, particularly around increasing the phase-out rate, which is an issue under discussion. Listeners may not know this. In 16 out of 21 reconciliation bills, I was recently told, Republicans and Democrats joined together on those bills. Reconciliation does not necessarily mean only one side. I remember the child health insurance bill, which was an important one. It was done through reconciliation. That was mostly Democrats, but there were Republicans on that. And there are, I would probably call them moderate Republicans, who have expressed considerable interest and urgency in meeting this moment with at least components of the kind of plan we're talking about.
I feel like we have to dust off the Schoolhouse Rock soundtrack in order to remind our listeners about the importance of that reconciliation process. When I based on my reporting this week, it would appear, and from some of the comments publicly from some of your colleagues, Jared Bernstein, that Senator Mitt Romney has really been showcasing that he might be on board, or at least showing a willingness to be a part of that process in terms of some of the proposals that he's put forth. Is he a senator that you've identified perhaps as someone who has shown a willingness to work with this administration on the stimulus plan?
I mean, the important thing about what Mitt Romney recently put forth, this is a program to provide resources to low-income parents with children, is it very closely mirrors something that President Biden insisted be a part of the American Rescue Plan. This is the child tax credit, which existed, but it was constructed in such a way that tens of millions of low-income children were excluded from its full benefit. The way it's constructed in the American Rescue Plan, and again, this looks a lot like what Senator Romney was talking about, it accomplishes full refundability and makes sure that parents with low-income kids get $3,600, and parents with young kids under 6 get $3,600, and parents with kids who are poor get about $3,000. And if you do the arithmetic, this plan cuts child poverty in half. Think about the lasting impacts of doing that, because we know that growing up poor has tremendous negative impacts in your lifetime perspective. So we think this is a really important piece of the plan. We're very happy to see other folks from different sides of the aisle interested in this idea as well.
Jared Bernstein's with us. He is a member of President Biden's White House Council of Economic Advisors. Yesterday, I interviewed Senator Marsha Blackburn, a Republican from Tennessee. And in contrast to Senator Romney, Jared, I mean, she is one of the Republicans who feels that America can't afford to spend this amount of money. Democrats, President Biden has said we can't afford not to invest in the economy right now. But what do you say to folks across the country who are concerned about the national debt and concerned that we might not be able to afford this amount of funds?
I say that I share your concern and that President Biden shares your concern, but that the time for dealing with the fiscal condition, the fiscal situation, is not when you're battling a pandemic of this magnitude. I mean, the president calls it a wartime footing. The last, when we were in a wartime footing in World War II, the debt to GDP ratio was about where it is right now, about 105, 106%. Now, this doesn't mean, though, that deficit concerns are permanently out of the picture. It means that when you're talking about a temporary measure like the rescue plan, and you're looking at interest rates that are very low, and you're making investments that have a lifetime payoff, like reducing child poverty by half, reopening schools, getting kids back learning again, and getting teachers back in the classroom, getting women back in the labor force, the long-term return on those investments is especially attractive given borrowing rates of 1% on the 10-year Treasury, as Bloomberg listeners probably know. When you're talking about more permanent measures, the kinds of things that are going to be in the recovery package coming next, not so much the cyclical get to the other side of the crisis idea, but once you're there, what do we do to build back a better economy? Now you want to look at, as the president says, permanent programs should be paid for, and that's where we're going with that.
This is only one half of the problem, the investment side. You know, in our show prep meeting with our producer Christine Barata, I was looking at the Bloomberg data here, and if the current execution of the vaccination rate holds, then the U.S. will not return to normal until 7 years. And so execution and the mass inoculation and making sure that folks get a vaccine in an orderly fashion and making sure the public-private partnership is working so that people can get vaccines is just so incredibly crucial in order to returning back to normal. And I would imagine that that's a huge part of your portfolio now in your current occupancy. So what can you tell us about making sure that the private sector is working so that we can get back to normal at a faster rate?
Well, first of all, the premise of your question is exactly correct. And not only have economists, myself, others, been saying this for a while. I remember Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, saying this at the very beginning of this, which is there will be no sustainable, robust, inclusive economic recovery without a plan for the vaccine. Now, you can look at the stock market and you can look at GDP and you can see some positive numbers. But we're into a K-shaped recovery, and the folks on the bottom leg of that K have been disproportionately hit by this crisis, both on the health and the economic side. When it comes to taking the approach that the Biden administration is to producing and distributing the vaccine, it's something we haven't seen in this country yet. The prior administration simply never got their act together when it came to managing this from the federal level, and the message in their case was, good luck, states, you're on your own. That's far from our message, and in fact, it's one of the reasons why we have significant resources in the American Rescue Plan that go, by the way, to states and localities. Those states and localities are the ones that are going to have to stand up these vaccine centers and organize the production and distribution. And that's something that the Republicans, by the way, have left out of their plan. And the president just doesn't see a way forward without helping states and localities put this virus behind us.
All right, I got one more question for you. I know you've got to go, and you've been very generous with your time. But yesterday, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen holding an economic meeting about having the SEC look into what happened with Robinhood and GameStop, and making sure that the market volatility is being fairly regulated. Can you give us an update in terms of just how important of a matter this is? It's something that has been driving a lot of market conversation, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah, I think the important point to make there, when I was a commentator before I went into the White House for this
I
round,
remember those days, Jared Bernstein.
I would hold forth on precisely this kind of thing and talk about volatility and markets ups and downs and speculation. I think the key thing to recognize now, and I say this as someone who is on the Council of Economic Advisors, the president, is that the SEC, Security and Exchange Commission, are the key regulator in this context, and they have been watching this development from the beginning, and and they've been, I think, vigilant about telling the public what's going on. Their statements, in my view, have been very informative, and essentially making sure that the plumbing of the markets remains in a solid place.
All right, I'll leave it there. Jared Bernstein of the White House Council of Economic Advisors for President Biden. Thank you so much for making the time. More next. This is Bloomberg.